we'll start out, Rich. Yesterday, I believe, Josh Rosen was cut from the team to make room for some other players. They brought in a corner. But the silver lining, or I guess the big news about this, is now the 49ers are down to 3 quarterbacks on their roster: Trey, Jimmy, and Sudfeld. Knowing, with COVID protocols, injuries in the NFL, so on and so forth, you got to at least have 3 quarterbacks. So to me, this is a move that means Jimmy Garoppolo's here for at least this whole season, now that they're only down to these 3 quarterbacks. So with that being said, and with the QBs up in the air and so much discussion about them, how do you feel Shanahan, or do you agree with the way Shanahan is handling this QB situation here with the 49ers?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think Rosen was going to last anyways. Whether it was going to be Sudfeld or Rosen, one of them was going to be cut. So whether that means Jimmy's staying or going, I guess it doesn't really matter at this point. They haven't really shown any inclination to be, at least publicly, trying to move him. So I think right now we can assume that he's going to be there week 1, whether he's a starter or not, and it doesn't really matter. I do think this team has a little bit of PTSD with the quarterback situation, with injuries and things like that. And so keeping a third one, who they would have kept anyways on the practice squad, I guess. I don't remember what the rules are this year for the practice squad, but, whether it was Rosen or Sudfeld, it wasn't really going to matter.
Do you, because I know, and we're going to get into like the play, but I know before the preseason game, you were pretty high on Trey Lance should be the starter just because of the dynamic that he's given. Obviously, there's a different message from Kyle Shanahan and Lynch in previous press conferences. Now, closer and closer to week 1 coming, the messaging is kind of changing. There's more room for Trey Lance to get in, yet he's not playing with the 1. So overall, do you kind of agree with the way that they're I guess playing this out in the public, as well as the moves that they're making behind the scenes, who gets to play with the 1s, and the way that they're using Trey Lance and Jimmy in preseason up until this point?
Yeah, I mean, you saw in the game that Trey kind of struggled with a few different things, and for the most part, I still thought he played really well. I just think that right now, most of the reps are going to go to Jimmy until shown otherwise. And then Trey could be very close. We don't know. I think the practices are closed to fans now, so we're not getting a lot of the reporting that we did the last 3 weeks. But I think they're really just Trey. They were really putting Trey in to see what he was going to be able to do after not playing for nearly 2 years. Minus the 1 game he had last year, and it was kind of vanilla and bland. And they don't really want to run him. They're being cautious with a lot of that, and they really just wanted to see how he was going to operate as a passer. And I think that's perfectly fine. I think he did a lot of good things. So it's not anything to be concerned with right now. I just think that in week 1 of preseason, Kyle's just trying to get through it and get on to the next week, so they can start getting into a little bit more of how they're going to structure, game planning and practices throughout the season, which is really what the next 2 weeks are about anyways.
Beautiful. And I'm glad you touched on, and we're going to go more in depth with the QBs coming up. But one thing I did want to get your perspective on is obviously with the way that Shanahan kind of limited Trey Lance, right? We didn't see any of the option plays that we've been hearing so much about in the preseason, or at least in the training camp. We didn't really see Trey break the line of scrimmage as far as with his legs. So it seems like you're on board with that, right? Let's focus on what Trey needs to work on out of the pocket, knowing that we have that weapon in the back pocket as far as his mobility and being able to use him in, option plays.
Yeah, I really just think, again, week 1 was just a way to test him and see how he was going to react in certain situations. I think Shanahan said it in the post game presser, was that we deliberately did that to him because we wanted to see some things, basically, which is fine. I mean, let the guy get a few reps. He hasn't played football in a while, and maybe this week is different. I don't think we're going to see too much of the running plays with the quarterback. Even when he was offensive coordinator with the Washington football team back in 2012 or whatever, they didn't really showcase much of RG3's ability in preseason either. It was kind of the same what we saw, last weekend. So, the Shanahans, they're very secretive with a lot of things, and some things they're not so secretive about. But when it comes to depth chart and things like that, you're kind of seeing it playing out with the quarterback situation, and they're not really going to tip their hand on how exactly they're going to integrate, Lance if he's not the starter week one.
Got you. So my conspiratorial, tentacles are going up thinking that the reason why they're not showing those dynamics of Trey is because in their mind, they are trying to get him ready to be the starter because they're focusing on the things that they know he needs the most work at and using preseason to really hone that in, knowing that the option plays and all that kind of stuff are things that he can run, in his sleep. And why give defensive coordinators a look at, what they're going to look like week one or even through the season? Let them try to figure it out on the fly while Trey is kind of already, lighting the league on fire. Do you think that could be a possibility, or do you think it's just more they still have their mindset that Jimmy's going to be the starter? Let's just work this guy like he's the future, maybe next season.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, even watching aside from the quarterback situation, what I personally think is going to happen is Jimmy's going to start week one and he's going to be on an incredibly short leash. And then how it turns out from there or progresses from there is anyone's guess. But, with even watching some of Trey's reps in the passing game on Saturday night, they're just the basic vanilla passing concepts they get through in the first 2 weeks of the install. They weren't really doing a whole lot of, I don't know if game planning is the right word, but they were showing looks that they always show in the regular season and preseason. So it's not stuff that's going to, be complicated and be hidden that they could install in a weekly game plan. It's all just going to be the base concepts, and how does, even with Garoppolo, I mean, the very first play was a designed play action rollout. I mean, that's stuff we see from them all the time. And
right.
Shanahan's not going to
go too deep in the bag.
Yeah, I think you can tell he hates preseason. He's just trying to get through it, and I think that's the right mentality. I mean, they've got a lot more players they need to evaluate and see who's going to fill out the back half of this roster. So one series with the starters was all they got, and then I expect maybe they'll get a quarter this week, and they'll probably get the half next week against the Raiders. But it's really about getting Trey in there and probably seeing a little bit more and more what he can do within the pocket, And I think it's going to keep coming behind the second and third team O line. Now that Trent Williams is sidelined with a little bit of an injury, they're not going to play him the rest of the preseason. Probably they got a good month to get him ready. So it's going to keep. Some of these things are going to keep showing up that some fans didn't like on Saturday night with Trey's play, but it is what it is. I just think they're just doing it to just get through the preseason and see what they have with Trey as a passer in the short term.
Yeah, and Coach Timo agrees with you as well. Of course, Shanahan is handling our QBs the right way. He is weaning Trey on the NFL, on what the NFL is all about. Full confidence in our coaching staff. That is what we brought Scrags back this year too. So vote of confidence from Coach Timo. So let's get into it. I know you were talking a little bit about the play, but how do you feel the play of the QBs have been up until this point? A lot of people are kind of glossing over that Jimmy played in that, first series as well. But overall, with the two quarterbacks that are playing, what are your grades? How do you feel about them up until this point?
The first preseason game, you just kind of want to see what they look like on the field. And Jimmy, I mean, it was whatever. He had a couple of passes that were high and behind the receivers the first time, or the first two passes, and then the third check down was nobody was open, so he checked it down. So that's fine.
I think we may have lost Rich for a second. Let's see if he gets back. Oh, there we go. Rich, you back?
Yeah.
You glitched out right there like the Matrix.
Oh. Didn't know that.
So you left
I
off
just kept
saying,
rambling on.
you read the last part we heard was Jimmy G did the check down and everything was fine for what you saw so far.
Yeah, it was fine. I mean, it's nothing too complicated, just kind of bland. Get him through the first series and see what they can do. You know, he's a guy that hasn't played in a year, almost a year too, since leaving in November with the ankle injury or end of October or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm. How did he look to you? Because, you know, obviously he had come back after a few games of being the initial injury happening, and he didn't look good, right? He didn't look mobile. He looked kind of hesitant in the pocket. It didn't seem that way in the first. Obviously, we only saw him for one series, but it seemed like he was moving well, at least well for Jimmy, and, you know, was pretty confident. Did you get that same notion from watching him play that he's healthy?
Yeah, I didn't really see any issue. I mean, he's had a full 8 months to recover, and he looked noticeably, you know, bulkier coming into what was it, OTAs or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then everyone's saying that he's been moving decently well in practice, so I don't think there's any issue there. I didn't really see any issue with it. He looks comfortable on that ankle. Did he have the knee brace on in the game? I wasn't really.
I don't believe so.
I don't think he did. So.
Yeah, I don't think he. I think he was playing brace free. So all good signs, you know, because there is a real reality that he may be the game one starter. But you know, we obviously got to see a lot more of Trey Lance. Tell me what your overall thoughts were as far as what you saw out of him.
I thought it initially it seemed like it started kind of rough for him, but when you go back and you look at some of the all 22 footage, he looked a little more comfortable than I thought he did. He was progressing through his reads on a lot of those plays. And just unfortunately that when they started trickling the starters out of the offensive line, then the quality of the offensive line play dipped noticeably, and we'll cover that here in a minute. But and then consequently, so did his play. I mean, some of the throws he was rushed on, some he was flushed up into the pocket and tried to get a pass off. That's to be expected. That line behind the starters isn't great, and they're kind of in trouble there. But you know, and that's going to reflect in how the quarterback plays. I mean, there's a couple of plays where the sacks are probably on the line, but you know, 3 or 4 games from now, Trey maybe makes that play and hits his hot receiver, because there was a couple that I felt he could have probably gotten rid of the ball, but he's getting the timing down of everything, and I don't necessarily put that on him. I mean, you don't want your lineman getting beat right at the snap anyways, but you know, one of the reasons why they drafted him was because of his ability to step up in the pocket. So, you know, he's going to figure that timing out, I think, and he'll be fine. But, you know, first game action in a while, how much stock do you really put in that?
Right. And one thing that I think, you know, a lot of people may not like take into play is even with the year that he played as a starter at NDSU, he averaged like 16, 17 passes per game. You know, they were pretty much like
blowing teams out.
Right. And also, you know, he used his weapon as far as mobility very, very well. So it's not like he's gotten a lot of reps throwing. And I think some of those just like lack of experience kind of showed in what you were saying. Like even Jack Hammer was on earlier this week with me, and he was saying there was some reads that he missed. You know, sometimes he could have thrown the ball, throw a guy open kind of throws that he's just not necessarily comfortable making right now. But did you see, you know, stuff out of him that you feel like he is going to progress and, you know, he could be a legitimate starter even this year?
Oh, absolutely. I think that you can see it. You can see it in the game too. You know, when some of those breakdowns occurred in the processing that he was going through. You know, he seemed to be kind of figuring it out already. And if everything we've heard about him is true, then he's going to figure it out. He's a smart kid, and they took him for a reason. So I don't really think there's an issue there. You know, he's mostly going to get his reps behind the second and third team O-line again this week. So we'll see what he's able to clean up with them. If he's able to clean up a lot of stuff with them, then there won't be any issue at all.
Now, I know when we spoke maybe a few weeks ago, Rich, you were pretty high on Trey being the week 1 starter, saying that that's the move that the 49ers should make. After what you've seen and heard through training camp up until this point, are you still with that same take? Would you want Trey Lance to be the week 1 starter?
Yeah, I haven't wavered from that.
Didn't think you would, my friend.